going to ask the Lord for the word, for His word, so that we can share this moment reflecting on the silence of the cross. And I read to you from Galatians 3:1. We are saved by faith. How foolish you are, Galatians! How could they bewitch you after Jesus Christ has been presented to you as crucified? I shall ask you only this: did you receive the Spirit by the practice of the law or by believing the message? How can you be such fools? You begin with the Spirit and end up with the flesh. So you have experienced all this in vain. Will that it were not so? Did God give you the Spirit and work miracles among you because of your observance of the law, or because you believed in His message? Remember Abraham. He believed God, and because of this was held to be a just man. Understand then that those who follow the way of faith are sons and daughters of Abraham. The word of the Lord. So we thank God for His word, and it's the second time He gives us the word. I have experience with this particular reflection on the cross, and it is called the silence of the cross, because it is the learning of how to carry our cross. And usually the primary conception of carrying the cross begins with believing that our cross is all our trials, toils, tribulations of this earthly life. And it has some of it. But the true weight of the cross is our conscience. When our conscience is really open to God and we do feel the pain of sin, then we do begin to carry our cross. Because we will never be able to carry our cross unless we have the pain of sin. Because it is the pain of sin that makes the cross. A lot of people live this life indifferently, and they do not feel the pain of their sins. They do have to endure all kinds of trials and toils and tribulations in this life. They also have to go through disease. They also have to go through a lot, but still they don't feel the pain of sin. So therefore, they are not able to carry the cross, because carrying the cross means dying to self and being able to love so much that you are able to obey God. And therefore, to obey God is to be able to understand the fear of God, and therefore to understand that you should repent. You should have a contrite heart. And a contrite heart is an open conscience where you are aware of the dimension of the consequences of your actions. And therefore, your life truly wakes is a real cross, because it is not easy to walk in grace with God. You have to renounce to self, and it wakes. Your flesh wakes, the world wakes, the devil wakes because of temptations, and all of these becomes a big cross. And that cross is only possible if you have the pain of sin. The more you walk with the pain of sin or your sin, the more you begin to walk also with the sin of all sinners. And that's why Jesus was carrying the sins of all of us, because He was innocent. But since we are not innocent, we will end up carrying the sins, the weight of the sins of everyone, and our sins, because we are not innocent. And so our cross will begin to be a cross only when we have the pain of sin. That's why we could say that the ladder to climb to heaven is the cross. And therefore the stations of the cross will be the steps, each one of them. So we have to walk through the steps, and we have to go through each one of them and understand what the trial of Jesus is when He is condemned to death. And that first station that sets up the walk of Calvary, and He is judged by the world, judged by people that are worshiping worldly powers and worshiping human glory, and they exchange that human glory and worldly powers for the Messiah. So they chose Barabbas. They chose a revolutionary man that was fighting for a cause that was not holy and wasn't a good person, but they chose him, and it was like a sign of saying to God, we don't accept the Messiah. The Messiah did not convince us. This is not the Messiah we want. We want a different Messiah. We want a Messiah to save us from the Romans and to do this and the other, whatever they were claiming. And this is exactly what happens with parents and children when children decide to go and engage themselves in a religious vocation or in priesthood, and parents didn't have those plans for the children. And then they said, this is not the child I wanted. I wanted a child that was going to graduate at school, get married, and have children, and give me the descendants of this family, and also to give us company and joy for the rest of the life. This is not what we want. And though we have so many Catholic parents that think and believe like that, that doesn't make them really who God created them to be as Catholics, because that is not a Catholic faith. But it's still, when we focus on the cross, then we focus on suffering. You know that suffering is a healing path. The path of suffering is a healing. And then we are to be healed because we are all wounded. We have a wound. And the wound is mortality, as we were talking about yesterday. This is the wound we carry. We carry the wound of death, and then we have to die to sin, meaning we have to go through this death of dying to sin in order to embrace life and to resurrect with Jesus. But when we say resurrect with Jesus, we understand his promise when he says, if you follow me and you carry your daily cross and obey my commandments, I will resurrect you in the last day. So will that mean that I am dead until I get there and he resurrects me? So that means that the full realization of my walking with God is that I'm going to be delivered to the spiritual world, and that is the time when true life is going to bloom in its plentifulness. Before, we are just in a walk of resurrection. We are going into resurrection, as if we were coming from the darkness into the light. And this is the walk. You know, every time we look at the cross, we only have two options. One option is to be a witness of the cross and be alarmed and sorry. Some people during the Holy Week, they even cry and they feel the drama of the passion of Jesus, and they go through some pain of witnessing the passion, because they are witnessing it historically and sometimes even mystically. But that doesn't mean you are crucified with Jesus, because one thing is to be alarmed by what took place in crucifixion and the whole passion of Jesus, but another thing is to be crucified with the Lord. Those two things. That's why one of them could be called religion, and the other one could be called spirituality. We could be just religious people that are witnesses of crucifixion, and we will be watching Jesus crucified. You know, those will be the equivalent of the apostles that ran away and were watching everything from a distance. See, and then the spirituality will be the ones that were right by the cross. So they witnessed the same, but they were also dying with the Master, because you know it was against the law, the Jewish law, to mourn, to cry for a condemned man, for a damned person. It was not allowed. Anybody couldn't possibly cry a person that is sentenced to death because of a crime. It's against Mosaic law. The Jews will not allow that. So those women that were walking with Jesus and crying with him, they were martyrs. They didn't care of losing their lives. They could have been sentenced to death by the Jews for doing that. And they did it. They cry and they walk all the way with him. So all of the holy women of Jerusalem that walk with Jesus towards the foot of the cross, and John, they were already martyrs. That's why none of them died as a martyr physically. You see, none of them was martyrized physically because they already were martyrs. You know, they already gave their lives for Jesus. Each one of them. Our Lady, all the holy women that were there, and St. John, they all gave their lives to the Lord. And then the rest of the apostles were all sacrificed physically. They were all killed. And so each one of them had to be sacrificed. And now, when we understand that mystery, we know that Christianity means cross, and cross means dying on the wood, and dying on the wood means martyrdom. So therefore, I will never be able to climb the mountain towards Jesus in Golgotha if I don't decide to die with him. Meaning, my Christianity will not be into the full conception of it unless I am decided to die for the Lord. See, if I die for the Lord because I decide to be truthful, obedient, faithful, if I am walking with him regardless, I do not have any condition, I go along with the Lord and die for the Lord, testify my faith regardless, and that is martyrdom. And especially these days, more and more so, it becomes more and more difficult to be who we are. And the world is going to become even more tense and intimidating to people that believe, to believers, because this is a world of unbelievers. And the worshiping of the world is bigger and bigger every time. The world is more and more idolater and less of God. So therefore, people of God are more and more martyrs. Today, you see very often how people get fired from big institutions and corporations just because of their faith, just because they make a statement, just because they don't go along with the rules of the company, because they don't want to sin and go against the gift of life, and so many other issues that are being passed on employees, on people that work on big corporations. And a lot of them are martyrs already. They lose their jobs, they lose their reputation also because they damage their names, and they are not able to get a job anywhere else, and many things like that. So there are many levels of martyrdom. It's like I know martyrs within the church. I met a seminarian in Ohio, and the seminary was infected with homosexuality, and he was so plagued with it that the head of the seminary, the bishop, and all of the seminarians were gay, but two of them were two seminarians that came from outside, from New York City. And those seminarians, one of them walked away, and the other one stayed. And he was doing 3 hours a day of adoration. The guy was this thin, he was eating very little, and he was a true martyr. I never seen a true martyr like that with my own eyes. This guy was dying to convert these people or to get them to go. He was praying to the Lord never to let any one of those become a priest. Unfortunately, many of them did. It just 2 years ago, that seminary was closed down after a long investigation. Many people denounced this. I was one of them, and many others continuously denounced that. But there was so much involved around, so many politics and so many things going around that it was not possible to do it. All of a sudden, it's done already. Thanks God. But this seminarian ended up being already ordained in New York City. He's a very young priest, and he's a very beautiful man. He's a very holy priest. And I consider him to be an incredible victim. He studied there for a while, and every day and every year that he was there was like martyrdom. He used to write to me all the time. And so we find martyrs within the church. We find people that are really going through this, fighting for the faith, testifying the faith, dying for the Lord, and regardless of what they have to do, regardless if they have to suffer whatever they have to suffer. And I would say this is what is called for real, the silence of the cross. In an opportunity, a lady wrote to me and told me if I could go this is very common in my apostolate, if I could go to a church somewhere in the U.S. also. And I accepted. I said, yes, I will go next year in such and such time if this works for you. And she set it up. So the day came when I arrived, and she picked me up at the airport, and then she told me, I didn't want to tell you everything that's going on in this Paris because you probably wouldn't come, but we need you here, and you're going to be surprised to what's going on in this church. I do not belong to a parish, but my daughter does. And my daughter is also part of the people that are lost in that church. And she said, this is a New Age church, a church where in the parish hall they have all kinds of classes of yogas and reikis and feng shuis and enneagrams and all kinds of transcendental meditations on oriental pagan religions and all kinds of things going on. The priest himself is a New Age priest, and they do ceremonies around the altar, holding hands on circles that move around during the Eucharist, and things that were absolutely outrageous. And then she said, I just told them about the story of you kidnapping with the guerrillas, and they are very excited about the action of the story. But they have no idea there's a mystical story behind that. So they place a poster on the church saying, kidnapped man finds his way to integrity, morals, and values, right? And then I came there, and when I began to speak, they began to become really uncomfortable. As soon as I began to say, the Lord spoke to me, and I began to describe hell, they were all going back like this. And I could see all these people changing. Some of them begin to walk out. And there was a moment, there was a moment when I had this incredible sight where the Lord was pushing for me to, I noticed when the Lord is leading me in a given way, And then at the very end of the last pew on my left side, at the very end, there was an old lady, very short lady, sitting there like this, very quietly. She hardly moved, hardly blinked an eye. She was there. I could see her very clearly. And the Lord kept on taking me to her attention all the time like that. And I was thinking, I wonder, but I kept on giving the testimony. I knew it was difficult because, when I come into a place and I begin to describe my story, in the beginning it's just a human story with a lot of action. Guerrillas and kidnapping and bats and mosquitoes and all kinds of things like that, torture and fear and despair, and all of that is like a movie. People are used to watch movies like that, so they like it. But once I begin to speak, and then I begin to see my life. Up until then, they say, well, he was hallucinating, okay? Then they say, and then I heard the voice of the Lord. Then they begin to go, wait a minute, this is getting out of hand, It's almost like St. Paul in the Areopagus, when he was speaking to the Greeks. It's almost the same, like people were there, and at the end say, wait a minute, resurrection, what is this about, Then at the end of the talk, what I was saying is, when I begin to speak like that, it's like people getting ready to take off in an airplane, right? Passengers are coming in. Sometimes they come in very slowly, and then in the middle of the talk, the plane begins to try to take off, and it's like very heavy. And I'm having a very hard time as a pilot, right? The next thing I know, it takes off like this, almost as if it's going to crash, and takes off, and everybody's on, right? Usually that's what happens in every talk. But this talk was going on forever. People were in the plane, but they wasn't taking off. It was very difficult. And at the end, it took off just for a little bit, like this, and then landed. And then when I finished, I walked away like this in the middle of the church, and went to the back, and the lady came out. It was the first one that came out to the outside there. And I had a table with books and CDs and DVDs that I always bring in. I'll bring along with me. And then she went right there and grabbed a book of my testimony, and she said, could you sign it for me? Then she gave me her name. Her name was Lucy. So I signed I gave her my autograph and made a little note. And then she told me, I really thank you for you coming here. And when she was talking to me, the Lord was showing to me that lady, only that lady was the one holding that whole parish. That woman was the one holding the whole parish. So a young girl was helping me to sell the books, and she was part of the church, of a youth group that was into yoga, right? So I asked the girl, do you know this lady? And she said, she always comes here, but no one cares for her. It's almost like insignificant, so to say, right? And then I find out that she was a lady that was always in adoration, the only one the only one that cared for the Blessed Sacrament, the only one that was bringing flowers to the Lord, because nobody could ever place a flower pot before the Lord, and nothing. She was doing that for years. She was the only one taking care of Jesus in that church. The only one, because no one else cared. The way they serve the host is they put the chalice and the host here, and everybody walks in and gets it on their own. If they want to take the wine or the host or both of them, they do, and the priest is not even there. He's sitting back there, and that's the way they do it, and everything there is like that. It's a horrifying sight, and so what I'm trying to convey here is that woman was the silence of the cross. Well, she was on the cross. She was carrying that. She was like with Jesus, and she was going with it, and she was carrying everybody's sins with her. And she was there so strong, but you could see the pain in her heart. She had that holy pain, the pain of Jesus, which is like a holy pain, a pain that is gigantic, but it's a holy pain, and because it's the pain of everybody's sins. It's like a good mother or a good father that feels the pains of the children, especially when the children are not with God. They carry that as a big pain in their hearts, and everything they do, every prayer they say, is always asking God, Lord, I'm offering my whole life and every bit of my heart for the salvation of my children. So please bring them back to the faith. And this kind of pain is the true silence of the cross. And you could see that people normally will approach the cross not only to be a witness of the cross, but also to get the crucified Lord to serve you. Because a lot of people come crying to the crucified Lord to obtain from the Lord these favors for temporary benefits, and this is all the relationship people will have with the crucified Lord. Give me, Lord, save me, Lord, help me, Lord, which is part of our relationship with God, because obviously God wants us to show him our needs, but the thing is, when you are part of the scandal of the church and of the cross and not the silence of the cross, you are never crucified with the Lord. You're always outside the crucifixion, and you are begging the crucified Lord to help you, to save you, but save you from our temporary endeavors, your temporary life, but not save you in the sense of saving, in the sense of salvation, which is eternal salvation. Because most everybody's needs is to come and solve the temporary life needs. Everything earthly, everything human, everything that is here now and the immediate future, and that is the relationship. So people like that are never in a unity with the cross. They are not crucified. So when you become one with the cross, because you are with the Lord, crucified with him, and you are dying to self, and you are aware that it's not about you, it's about salvation of sinners, and you are to be a converted sinner that serve yourself to God in order to become bread for salvation. It's like the biggest example of this is Saint Ignatius of Antioch. You know that he was one of the first bishops, and his story is a perfect story of what the silence of the cross is. Because you remember he was taken by Nero to Rome, and he was going to be sacrificed there. And the trip was a long trip from Antioch to Rome. And all these Christians all around the way where he was going through, traveling through to Rome, they were all begging the Romans for his release. And he was begging them not to do that. Because he says, I had to be crushed by the teeth of the beast in order to be served as food for humanity, for salvation of souls. And that's actually what happened, because once he got to the Colosseum, to the Roman Colosseum, and he was going to be thrown into the lions, dressed as a bishop, he ran towards the lion singing psalms. And that's the day when the most Romans have converted to Christianity. A lot of the Romans that were there converted to Christianity because of him. And he actually became bread of life. He was served as bread. And then this is the image of what the silence of the cross means when we understand that we have to die for the Lord, becoming one with him on the cross. We have to lay down on the wood of the cross and let them crucify us. Let them walk all over us. Let them place the crown of thorns on our head. Let them stab us and spit on us and slander us. And you see, despise us. And all of this is what becomes the crucifixion. You know how we fight against that. We fight. We get hurt when people speak ill of us, when people slander us, when they do not like us, when they despise us. It hurts and you fight back. And then that is exactly the opposite of the cross. The cross is to lay down on the wood and to let them do it. You see, it's like, and if they come and do it, you are even better crucified. You see, the more they nail you, the more they place the thorns on you, the more they humiliate you, the more they despise you, the better crucifixion, the tighter you are with Jesus on the cross. And this is the calling. You see, if we manage to do this, we really are Christians, because Christians means cross, and cross means crucify, and crucify means dying to resurrect. See, and this is the true meaning of our faith. So this silence of the cross is made of this powerful decision to be able to be so brave, so courageous, that you are able to go for letting them do it to you. Let life walk all over you. You see, animal law walks all over you. It doesn't think twice to walk all over you. So if you become this bread of life, then the world is going to despise you. Unleavened bread is a bread that has no taste. It's tasteless, right? And then the host is made of unleavened bread, and it's supposed to be a bread that is tasteless. So when we understand what we are to become like in order to be a bread of life for the salvation of souls, we know we have to become unleavened bread. And how do you become unleavened bread? You have to take all the spices out of you. You have to take all the yeast out of you. We are blown up and we have a lot of yeast. And if we have to take all this yeast away, and we have to take all the spices out and become tasteless. That's why people that are truly turned into the bread of life for God to use us as food, they appear to be tasteless for the world. They are insignificant. They have no meaning for people in the world, for people that are of the flesh and of the blood. They will not relate to you. You are tasteless. So therefore, there is no attraction to you whatsoever. You are uninterested. You are insignificant. Those are the biggest news, the best news. When you become tasteless, that means the beast will never taste you. No one wants to eat you because you are tasteless. You are free. You're not going to be touched. So you become that bread of life because you could be sacrificed and for the salvation of souls, because now you are prepared. Now you could be served on the altar and prepared to be salvation for others. And it's the only way we could do that, becoming tasteless, so we can become a bread of sacrifice. And that's why every time we can see ourselves being so much of the flesh and having so much spices and so much yeast, because the yeast shows up by pride, by defending our human territories. That is yeast. That's why Jesus was talking about the yeast of the Pharisees and was telling the apostles, watch, be careful with the yeast of the Pharisees. But they were thinking he was talking about the plain yeast that you put in the bread, and because they didn't have the Holy Spirit yet, so they weren't getting anything. It's like Nicodemus wasn't getting it when Jesus was telling him he had to be born again. So, and then this is the same thing. We have this yeast in us that blows us up. It just turns us into a big person, because it's our great personality, this great building of self, and that's all yeast. And then if we take this yeast out of ourselves and become thin, small, little, simple, insignificant, tasteless, then at that moment we begin to take the spices out. The spices are all the ideas we have of self. Sometimes we feel we have many ideas of self. We think a lot about ourselves and think highly of ourselves, and it's not that we want to live without esteem, but it's that we want to become nothing as we are in order to open up to be this true instrument of God that is simple and humble and is always accessible to the Spirit. And the only way to do that is to be that humble donkey, right? That is always accessible, always ready to be jumped on and be ridden. And this is only possible if we take the yeast and the spices out and we become tasteless. That way, our rebellious nature will be tame and will be subjected in obedience to the Spirit. And that's the beginning of being on the cross. It's the only way to be crucified. And then the crucifixion truly begins to take you to the final state of it when you're really feeling the concern for all of humanity. People usually are able to love those that are immediately on your side. You're concerned about them, those that are immediately placed around you in your life. I'm sure because of your charisma and your spirituality, you have the gift of opening up your hearts to all of humanity. And then your fourth vow, which is the service of the missionary life of charity, opens you up to be charitable to everyone. You know, that is the ultimate gift. Because if one would like to know which is the best way not to ever touch purgatory, will be your fourth vow, right? That vow is like saying, if you fulfill that vow, you will never enter purgatory life. Because purgatory is made of all of those uncharitable acts in your life. When your heart is not open to love and help and serve everyone else regardless of who they are, which will be the equivalent of that vow of the charity service of charity, right? And now, one thing we have to understand is that if I'm standing in a corner in the street and people are flowing by, and in order for me to know how charitable I am, I have to make sure that in my heart I really care and I really feel for everyone that is flowing by. And then to make sure that those people are not flowing by like the cattle, you know. They are souls and I feel for them. Because also, even in your spirituality and even in your missionary life, you could get to the point where you will only be concerned to those that are delivered to your hands or those that are chosen to be helped, because they are the ones in need. And the rest could go by, and they could easily go by like the cattle, right? Because we don't probably notice that we also have to feel for them, though they don't appear to need us, you know? But what happens is, it's not how much one needs one another, it's how much one loves one another. It's like I don't need to say anything to anyone in order to love them. I just love them, and that is all I have to do. So when I'm out there in the world, and even when I'm here praying, and if I am able to reach humanity and care for all of them, then I am truly on the cross with Jesus. Because that means being crucified, when I can feel the needs, the pains, and the concerns of every human being. And it's not only those delivered to my hands. It's not only those that I have a duty to serve and to help, but everyone. And then that means I'm crucified. And it's the only way to be crucified. Because if I am selective, and I am only concerned about a selective group of people because those were the ones I was placed in charge of, then my love is imperfect. My charity is imperfect. Because though I have to pay more attention to those I'm on duty to take care of, that doesn't stop me from knowing that I have to also be attentive and loving to those that are not immediately under my wing. Because I have to have this heart that is open to love everyone and that is open to feel love for everyone. And this is like the very heart of the cross. That is the cross. That is true Christology. You know, true Christology is and to be crucified with the Lord, to lay down yourself on the wood and be nailed and be stabbed and be spat on. That the only way is when you really truly open up your heart to love everybody and to care for everybody. I always examine myself, you know. It's like before I come to a talk, which I do almost daily, for so many years, and I'm going to speak to people, I always kneel and ask the Lord, Lord, only one thing I want, one thing, is that I'm going to go there to speak about you and whatever you're going to do through me. But let it be that the only reason that I ever go there is because I truly love them and care for the salvation of their souls. That should be the only care, the only reason that I'm moved to do this. There should not be another reason, should not be any other interest. I should not be on there as me. It should be the mission. The mission should be the aim and the reason for being here. The mission, the mission of God for salvation of souls. The mission of God for building up this spirituality of all of yours so that you can save more souls, so that you could have more love, so that you could serve better, so that you could be holier. And this is only the reason why I should be here. And then every time I'm standing somewhere in the streets and people are flowing by, I'm asking the Lord, please give me the love for these people. I don't want to stand here and not to love these people, even the ones that are flying by me in an automobile or whatever. Sometimes you are in a freeway, in a highway. People are flying by practically, and those people just cross your path. Those people just touch your life. They are in the book of life. They are in the book of your life, every one of them. So I don't want any one of them to cross my life, to cross my path unattended. See, because my responsibility is to be present. And that's why St. Paul says we are vessels of clay that carry the treasure. And the example is in the Acts of the Apostles. You see how when Jesus resurrected for 40 days, they never went anywhere to tell anyone that Jesus resurrected. And you wonder, how couldn't they? I mean, they should have gone everywhere and say, he resurrected. No one did. They were hiding behind locked doors, or they were somewhere fishing. You notice, every time Jesus appeared to them, they were not in the Jerusalem temple telling people he resurrected. They were just going about the little business they were doing before Jesus chose them as apostles, or they were hiding behind locked doors in the upper room somewhere. And it wasn't until they received the Paraclete, the day of Pentecost, that they came out and then went everywhere, telling everyone Jesus resurrected. And that spirit that came upon them is our strength. So therefore, when we have the Spirit of God the way we do it, and then to realize that that Spirit is active in us, the first thing we have to discover is that that Spirit is a union with everybody's life, with everybody's soul, that we go out there to take Jesus to everyone, but everyone has to be on our territory, every single soul, everyone that goes by. So the apostles will go to the temple every day, and then people will not even bother asking them to lay hands on the sick or the possessed. They will just wait and line them up on the streets. And the apostle will walk towards the temple, and their shadows, just their walking by, will heal them, will deliver them from the spirits just by them walking by. And that shows that if we are present, truly present, with the love of God in our hearts for everyone that crosses our path, they receive the blessings that we carry. And so at that moment we become a blessing and they become a blessing to us. As I was saying before, every act, every deed of goodness, every deed of love, and it becomes a blessing to us, because we are blessed in return by the angels of God guarding people. And these are the very good sense of salvation when we focus ourselves on the crucified Lord. The Lord is asking us always to be attentive to one another, never to be indifferent to anyone, and never to be selective, because you see, because of original sin, we grow up among ourselves divided. We are divided by races, by cultures, by all kinds of situations and elements of society today. We are divided. We are not a unity. And then when we come into the senses of Christ, then we have to realize that we are to become one with everyone. And that is the difficulty, that we are not aware that we are not to be divided. We are to be one with everyone, regardless of race, regardless of anything. And I'm sure that is probably one of the strongest grounds of your spirituality, that you are able to go out there and grasp the poor and the needy without thinking or caring about who they are. They could be anywhere and from anywhere, and they could be anyone, and then you will help them out. But this is the meaning of the cross. The cross, the only way you could be crucified is if your heart is actually within everyone's care. You care for everybody, and it's the only way you could possibly do that. I would say that one of the most powerful reasons why the Stations of the Cross are so much of a gigantic weapon is because the spirits live in the eternal present. They are not confined to time and space. So one time I was in Brooklyn, New York, and these people from this community, that was a very difficult one, were in one of my talks. And at the end they approached me and asked me if I could give them some kind of advice as to how to help their neighborhood, because they had a horrifying neighborhood that was growing and growing in violence and evil, prostitution, drug dealings, all kinds of evil, gangs, you name it. And then these people were very holy people, simple, humble, holy people, mostly from Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And so we sat together on the sides, and I told them, I shared with them the mystery of the Stations of the Cross that Our Lady shared with me. And I told them, what if you, every Friday at 3 o'clock, you get a few people together and walk around the neighborhood praying the Stations of the Cross? Just bring a little cross, wooden cross with you, and just walk in a group and pray the Stations of the Cross all around the neighborhood. When you finish the 14 stations, if you still have a few blocks to cover, go on and begin them again, and do that every Friday, right? You won't believe, these people were so faithful, and they were so serious about what they wanted to do, that they began to do that the next Friday. I didn't see them for 2 years. 2 years later, I came back. When I came back, they gave me the news that 2 big corporations bought every building in the area. Those people, that group of people, plus 2 priests and a group of nuns, were the only ones that were able to keep their flats and places within this big new development that was coming in, and they gave each one of them their places to live for very little money. So they were all, like, the whole neighborhood was changed, and everything changed in that neighborhood. Nobody will ever believe that that was the action of those Stations of the Cross, but I guarantee you that it was. Those corporations were trying to move into different areas of Brooklyn and different areas of the big area of New York City, and those were the only ones they were able to buy. And then those people were absolutely sure that the Stations of the Cross were the ones that clean up the neighborhood.